Jon Snow was alone when he thought he was a bastard, and he was even more alone when he learned he was a prince. So what if I told you his loneliness had nothing to do with his name? It was decided in one forgotten scene in Season 1. You are a bastard from the North. Tyrion Lannister says this to Jon Snow in the very first episode of Game of Thrones, and it's not meant as an insult. It's a statement of fact, an acknowledgement of identity, a recognition of permanent otherness. Jon's response? Silence. Not anger, not denial, just the quiet acceptance of a truth he's carried his entire life. And then, years later, in the crypts of Winterfell, everything changes. You're Aegon Targaryen, true heir to the Iron Throne. Sam Tarly says these words to Jon Snow in the crypts of Winterfell in Season 8, Episode 1. His voice carries certainty, even excitement, as if he's delivering good news, as if he's handing Jon the answer to every question that has haunted him since childhood. Jon's response? Not joy, not relief, not even surprise. Just this quiet, horrified realization that everything is about to get worse. Because Jon Snow has spent his entire life being alone for one reason. He was a bastard. Ned Stark's shameful secret. The stain on an honorable man's reputation. The boy who didn't belong in Winterfell, but had nowhere else to go. There's a moment in Season 1, Episode 2 that almost everyone overlooks. It happens in Winterfell, just before Jon leaves for the Night's Watch. Bran is lying unconscious after his fall. Jon wants to say goodbye to his brother one last time. He enters Bran's room. Catelyn Stark sits beside the bed, rigid with grief. Jon approaches quietly, respectfully. He explains he's leaving for the Wall. He just wants to say goodbye. Catelyn doesn't look at him. She doesn't acknowledge his presence. She just sits there, cold and distant. And then she says 5 words that define everything Jon believes about himself. It should have been you. Not, please leave, not, this isn't a good time, not even silence. She wishes Jon had fallen instead of Bran. She wishes the bastard was the one lying broken and unconscious instead of her trueborn son. Jon doesn't argue. He doesn't defend himself. He doesn't cry or rage or demand basic human decency. He just leaves. Because this is what Jon Snow has always known. He is a problem. His existence causes pain. He doesn't belong in Winterfell, doesn't belong in the Stark family, doesn't really belong anywhere. And for 17 years, Jon has accepted this as the natural order of things. Bastards don't belong. That's just how the world works. When Tyrion tells him to wear his bastard status like armor so it can never be used to hurt him, Jon tries. He joins the Night's Watch, where bastards and broken men can find purpose. He tells himself that he's choosing this life, that he's making something honorable out of his shameful birth. But the truth is simpler. Jon goes to the Wall because it removes the complication of his presence from Winterfell, because Catelyn will be happier without him, because bastards have limited options, and the Wall is where bastards go to disappear. Everything about Jon's early life is shaped by this understanding. He sits apart from his siblings at feasts. He doesn't expect Catelyn's love. He doesn't dream of inheriting Winterfell or marrying a highborn lady or having a future beyond service and duty. He is a bastard, and bastards are alone. This loneliness is painful, humiliating, unjust, but at least it makes sense. At least Jon understands why he suffers. At least there's a reason. And for 7 seasons, Jon carries this burden. Every rejection, every loss, every moment of isolation he attributes to one simple fact: I am Ned Stark's bastard son. When the Night's Watch brothers mock him for being highborn, he's isolated by his Stark blood. When he falls in love with Ygritte but can't fully give himself to her, he's isolated by his vows and honor, the only things a bastard can claim. When he becomes Lord Commander and his own brothers murder him, he's isolated by the choices he made, the mercy he showed, the honor that bastards can't afford. When he's resurrected and becomes king in the north, he gives it up to bend the knee to Daenerys, partly because a bastard has no real claim anyway. Every choice Jon makes is filtered through this identity. I am a bastard. I don't deserve what others take for granted. My suffering is the price of existing in a world that never wanted me. But then, everything changes. Sam and Bran tell him the truth, and Jon's entire understanding of his loneliness shatters. The truth that changes nothing. Picture the scene. Jon is standing in the crypts of Winterfell, surrounded by the stone faces of dead Starks, his ancestors. Except they're not his ancestors. Not really. Not anymore. Sam is explaining the secret marriage, the annulment, the birth at the Tower of Joy. Bran is confirming it with his cold, certain voice. Jon Snow is Aegon Targaryen, legitimate, royal, the true heir. And Jon's face doesn't show relief, it shows dread. Because Jon immediately understands what Sam, in his excitement, doesn't. This changes everything and nothing at the same time. The things this revelation should fix: the stigma of bastardy that has defined Jon's entire life, his outsider status in the Stark family, his lack of claim, rights, or legitimacy, the shame he's carried since childhood, the reason for Catelyn's hatred, the explanation for his isolation. The things this revelation actually does: destroys his entire identity, separates him from the only family he's ever known, ruins his relationship with the woman he loves, makes him a political threat to everyone around him, burdens him with a claim he never wanted, gives him a new reason to be alone, even more absolute than before. Jon thought his loneliness was about bastardy. He was wrong. His loneliness is about being fundamentally displaced from the world, caught between identities, never fully belonging anywhere. And being Aegon Targaryen doesn't fix that. It makes it infinitely worse. When legitimacy becomes a new prison. Think about what Jon loses the moment he learns the truth. He loses his name. Jon Snow is who he's been for 30 years. Every memory, every relationship, every moment of his life is tied to that name. Aegon Targaryen is a stranger's name, attached to a dead prince he never knew, from a family he has no connection to. He doesn't feel like Aegon. He doesn't want to be Aegon, but he's not allowed to be Jon anymore either. He loses his family. The Starks raised him. Ned was his father in every way that matters. Robb, Arya, Sansa, Bran were his siblings. Those bonds defined him. But now they're his cousins. His entire childhood is retroactively rewritten. The family he fought to return to, the family he died for, isn't really his family anymore. Not in the same way. He loses Daenerys, the one person who understood his isolation, who shared his sense of displacement, who loved him without reservation, becomes forbidden. She's his aunt. Their love becomes taboo, impossible, tainted. And beyond that, his claim threatens hers. The political reality of his identity makes their relationship a crisis, not a romance. He loses his freedom. As a bastard, Jon could choose his own path. He could join the Night's Watch. He could bend the knee to a queen he believed in. His choices were his own. As Aegon Targaryen, every choice becomes dynastic. Every decision affects the entire realm. He can't just love Daenerys. He can't just serve. He can't disappear. His heritage makes him visible, scrutinized, dangerous. He loses his allies. Sansa sees him as a threat to northern independence. Daenerys sees him as competition for her throne. Varys sees him as a better option to rule. Tyrion sees him as a complication to manage. No one sees him as just Jon anymore. Everyone sees the claim, the blood, the potential problem. Jon Snow the bastard was easy to ignore, easy to dismiss, easy to send away. Aegon Targaryen is impossible to ignore, and that makes him more alone than ever. Because at least when he was a bastard, people underestimated him. They didn't fear him. They didn't try to use him. They just didn't want him around. As the true heir, everyone wants something from him, or wants him dead, or wants him gone. And Jon, who never wanted power, who never wanted a throne, who just wanted to belong somewhere, is trapped by a truth he can't escape. The cruelest realization. Here's what breaks your heart about Jon's story. His isolation has nothing to do with his birth and everything to do with fate. When Jon was a bastard, he had an explanation for his suffering. Of course he's alone. Of course he doesn't belong. Of course Catelyn hates him. He's a Snow, not a Stark. That's just how the world works. It's unjust, but it's understandable. But when Jon learns he's Aegon Targaryen, when the bastard stain is erased, when he's revealed as legitimate royalty with the strongest claim in Westeros, he's still alone. He's still separated from his family. He's still trapped between duty and desire. He's still making impossible sacrifices. He's still losing everyone he loves. He's still ending up in the cold, at the margins, exiled from the world. The revelation of his true parentage proves something devastating. Jon Snow was never alone because of his bastard status. He was alone because the world, the gods, fate itself decided that Jon Snow doesn't get to belong. Bastardy was just the first excuse. When that excuse is removed, the isolation remains, stronger than ever. And that's more tragic than anything else in his story, because it means Jon spent 30 years believing that if he could just overcome his birth, if he could just prove himself worthy enough, honorable enough, brave enough, he might finally find a place in the world. But worthiness has nothing to do with it. Jon is the most honorable man in Westeros, and it doesn't save him from loneliness. Jon saves the world from the Night King, and it doesn't earn him belonging. Jon is revealed as the rightful king, and it doesn't give him a home. Jon gives up everything, sacrifices everything, suffers everything, and it changes nothing. He is still alone, always alone. The pattern that never breaks. Once you see Jon's isolation as existential rather than circumstantial, his entire arc becomes unbearably clear. He joins the Night's Watch seeking brotherhood. He finds thieves, rapers, and cowards who resent him. He makes a few friends, but command separates him from them. He falls in love with Ygritte and finds acceptance among the wildlings, but he can't truly be one of them. His loyalty to the Watch, his mission to betray them, keeps him isolated even in her arms. He becomes Lord Commander, achieving the highest position possible. His brothers murder him for it. The very men he tried to save turn on him and stab him in the dark. He's resurrected and freed from his vows, but resurrection doesn't free him from loneliness. If anything, it deepens it. He's died and come back, an experience no one else can understand. He retakes Winterfell and is declared king in the north. Finally, acceptance, finally belonging. But he gives it all up to serve Daenerys, alienating the very people who crowned him. He learns he's Aegon Targaryen, legitimate and royal, and this truth, which should finally explain everything, only makes the isolation absolute. He falls in love with Daenerys and finds partnership, passion, purpose. Then he learns she's his aunt. Then he watches her burn King's Landing. Then he kills the woman he loves to save the realm. And after all of it, after everything he sacrificed and lost and endured, he's sent back to the Night's Watch, back to where he started, back to the frozen north, separated from everyone he loves, exiled from the family he fought so hard to return to. Jon Snow ends the series exactly where he's always been, alone. Not because he's a bastard. He's not a bastard. Not because he's unworthy. He's the most worthy person in Westeros. Not because he failed. He saved the world. He's alone because that is who Jon Snow is. A man without a place. A king without a kingdom. A son without a true home. And no revelation, no achievement, no sacrifice changes that. Why Catelyn's words still matter. Let's return to that moment in Bran's room in Season 1. It should have been you. When Catelyn says this,
Jon is a bastard. Her words are cruel, but they fit a cruel world. Bastards are unwanted. That's the rule. But here's what makes those 5 words so prophetic, so devastating, so perfectly tragic. They remain true even after Jon is revealed as Aegon Targaryen. The world still wishes he wasn't there. The world still treats his existence as a complication. The world still pushes him to the margins, to the cold, to exile. Catelyn wished Jon had fallen instead of Bran because his existence complicated her life. When Jon becomes Aegon Targaryen, Sansa wishes he would stop being a threat to northern independence. Daenerys wishes he didn't have a stronger claim than hers. The lords of Westeros wish he would either take the throne or disappear, but not remain in this impossible middle ground. Everyone, always, wishes Jon Snow was somewhere else, someone else, something easier to deal with. It should have been you. Not here, not visible, not complicating everything. Gone. And Jon, who learned very early to accept rejection quietly, who learned that his comfort matters less than everyone else's peace, goes. He went to the wall as a bastard. He goes beyond the wall as a king. Different reasons, same result. Alone. The question Jon never gets to ask. Here's what's most heartbreaking about Jon's entire journey. He never gets to ask why. Why should he suffer for his parents' choices? Why should he be punished for circumstances beyond his control? Why should honor demand that he sacrifice everything while dishonorable people prosper? When he's a bastard, the answer is clear, because that's how the world treats bastards. But when he's Aegon Targaryen, when he's legitimate, royal, the rightful heir, why is he still alone? Why does learning the truth make everything worse? Why does every revelation, every achievement, every act of heroism push him further into isolation? There's no answer. There's no reason. There's just the brutal reality that Jon Snow is meant to stand apart. Not because of bastardy, not because of royal blood, not because of anything he did or didn't do, but because that is his role in the story, in the world, in the cruel, indifferent machinery of fate. He is the person who saves everyone and belongs to no one. He is the person who does everything right and loses everything anyway. He is the person who transforms from bastard to king and remains in both identities completely alone.
The ending that proves everything. In the final episode of Game of Thrones, Jon is sentenced for killing Daenerys. Grey Worm demands his execution. The lords of Westeros debate his fate. And the compromise, the merciful solution, is to send him back to the Night's Watch. Back to the wall, back to the cold, back to exile. Jon Snow, the man who saved the world from the Night King, who united wildlings and northerners, who gave up his crown for the greater good, who killed the woman he loved to prevent genocide, is sent away. Because his existence is still a problem. His claim is still a threat. His presence is still a complication. Some fans interpret this as freedom. Jon finally escaping the politics and duty and betrayal, finally choosing his own path with the wildlings. But look at his face in those final scenes. There's no joy, no relief, no peace, just resignation. Because Jon understands what viewers sometimes miss. This isn't freedom. This is the same exile he's always lived, just with a different name. He's still separated from his family, still pushed to the margins, still sent away because the world doesn't know what to do with him. The final shot shows Jon riding north of the wall with the wildlings, disappearing into the snow. Alone with people, but alone nonetheless. Because Jon Snow has learned that it doesn't matter if you're a bastard or a king, a Snow or a Targaryen, guilty or innocent, worthy or unworthy. You can be all the right things and still end up alone. You can save the world and still be exiled from it.
You can discover your true identity and find that it changes nothing. The truth about Jon Snow. Sam and Bran thought they were giving Jon a gift when they told him the truth about his parentage. They thought they were freeing him from the burden of bastardy. They thought legitimacy would change his life. But they were wrong. Because Jon's loneliness was never about the label. It was about the reality beneath it. Jon Snow is a person caught between worlds in every possible way. Raised in the North, but Targaryen by blood. Stark in loyalty, but not in name. King by right, but servant by choice. In love with his queen, but destined to kill her. Alive, but having died. Honorable in a world that punishes honor. Wanting family, but separated from them by truth and duty and fate. There is no position Jon can occupy, no title he can claim, no identity he can inhabit that will make him belong. Bastard or Targaryen, Jon Snow stands alone. And that's the devastating truth that his entire story proves. Some people are meant to be alone. Not because they're bad, not because they're unworthy, not because they did something wrong, but because that is their fate. And learning you're not a bastard, learning you're a king, learning you're the hero who saved the world, doesn't change fate. It just proves that your isolation has nothing to do with circumstances you can change, and everything to do with who you fundamentally are. Jon Snow was always alone. When he didn't know he was a Targaryen, he was alone. When he learned the truth, he was still alone. When he saved the world, he was alone. When he lost everything, he was alone. In the beginning, in the middle, and in the end. Always alone. Not because of bastardy, but because that is the tragedy of Jon Snow. The man who belonged to everyone and no one. The king who had everything and nothing. The hero who saved the world and couldn't save himself from the one thing that defined his entire existence. Being alone. Always, always alone.